This is Sports Spectrum, the intersection of sports and faith, where we bring Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. We're so glad you're tuning into the show today, and we are presented by our friends at IJM, the International Justice Mission. Check out ijm.org/slavery to learn more about the reality of slavery and human trafficking and how you can join the fight. July 30th is World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. Listen to some of these statistics on slavery and human trafficking. Human trafficking generating about $150 billion a year. $150 billion with a B. An estimated 90% of forced labor takes place in the private economy, homes, businesses, and supply chains. 1 in 4 victims of forced labor slavery is a child. Women make up 49%, girls 23% of all victims of trafficking. And that's what we're going to spend some time on today with our friend Demi Lee Tebow, the wife to Tim Tebow and 2017 Miss Universe. Tim and Demi married January 20th, 2020 in South Africa, right before the pandemic. And Tim and Demi both joining together in this fight against slavery and human trafficking as part of the Tim Tebow Foundation and the Her Song Ministry. And Demi Lee Tebow is going to be our guest today on Sports Spectrum. We're going to have a real honest conversation here about her journey, but also about the work that she and Tim are doing with human trafficking and slavery. I also ask her a little bit about becoming a football player's wife. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But Demi Lee Tebow, I was so impressed with her and the fight that she is in. And really the reason why this fight that she is in stems back to a really horrific incident that she had to go through a few years ago. And she talks about that today here on Sports Spectrum. Let's take a listen to Demi Lee Tebow. Hi, Demi. How are you?
Jason, I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This is such a needed conversation that I'm so happy to see more people are having around the world today. It's not an easy conversation. It's not necessarily always a comfortable conversation to have. But with experiences, I've just learned that I will no longer be silent so that other people can be comfortable. And I appreciate you and organizations like IJM, joining us in this very needed conversation.
Yeah, it needs to happen and we need to talk about it. And, I think sometimes the best thing to do in those conversations, knowing that they're uncomfortable, are to have them and to know we can't hide it. We can't push it to the side. And we're certainly going to have that conversation here today. Before we get into your passion for justice and standing up against human trafficking, you and Tim both, obviously, let's learn a little bit about your background, where you grew up. I know there's some fascinating stories there on your background and what life was like as a kid growing up.
Yeah, Jason, I'm born and bred, proudly South African. I've been in the States nearly 4 years now. I can't believe it's been this long. Time really flies, but born and raised in South Africa. And obviously that has shaped pretty much, the majority of who and what I am today. I grew up in 2 very loving homes. My parents were divorced when I was pretty young, but grew up just loving Jesus, loving my family. I had a little sister with special needs, and to make a long story short, she's really the reason, together with Night to Shine, which is the Tim Tebow Foundation's worldwide program for people with special needs, that brought Tim and I together. So that's just a really, really special side of my life story. And yeah, I'm in the United States now. This is a new home to me, and just very honored to be able to get to do work that I love and I'm very passionate about, that is so fulfilling, and that brings me so much purpose, and to be able to do that alongside people that I so deeply adore, and especially being able to stand alongside my husband in the fight against human trafficking is probably one of the greatest honors of my life.
Yeah, it's a great work that you and him are both doing in so many different areas, especially fighting human trafficking and slavery. You're married to Tim, obviously one of the more famous athletes out there. So was sports something that you were interested in as a child growing up at all?
Jason, I don't know if, I don't know how much you know about like cricket or rugby, but those are my sports, okay? I'm a rugby girl through and through. And when I moved to the States, I had never seen a baseball, basketball, or football game in my life, not even on TV. I mean, I don't even think I've seen highlights of a football game in my life. So when I moved to the States, I told you about my little sister a little bit ago. And so South Africa is actually one of the countries that hosts Night to Shine. It's
Yes.
a worldwide prom, and so the only reason I got connected to Tim was because I knew about him as the Night to Shine guy. That's how I
Right.
got to know him. So he was my Night to Shine guy, still is. And I watched my first football game. I think it was the Gators versus LSU was my first ever football game that I'd been to. And it was awesome. So I've kind of married into sports, I would say, and I've loved learning about it. But, I played sports. I played field hockey. I ran track. So I've always loved sports. But it's pretty funny. People always say, but you and Tim don't necessarily have that much in common then. And I'm like, yeah, we don't. But Tim has a good answer. He always says, we don't necessarily have that much in common, but we have quite a lot in purpose. And I think that is really one of the secrets of our relationship and marriage.
No, that's really well said. And you guys got married right before the pandemic. I saw the date, January 20th, 2020. Fairly easy
Yeah.
day to remember when you think about that, those numbers, but just a
Yeah.
few months before the pandemic. So what was that like? I have to imagine in some cases, as a newlywed, I've been married almost 22 years now, getting married and
That's
then
awesome.
everything shut down and having, getting to spend that time with your husband and get to know him. That first year is so critical. What was that like for you, kind of suddenly realizing, okay, everything's changing in this world with the pandemic and you guys are newlyweds?
I mean, first of all, I am just so grateful. I know how much goes into planning a wedding and the effort. And we got married in South Africa, so we had so many guests traveling abroad, and just so grateful that we were actually able to get married, because I know so many couples are just kind of in a waiting period, waiting, hoping that they'd be able to even have a small celebration. As I know South Africa, COVID's still very bad there at the moment. So just have a lot of compassion for brides worldwide that might be listening to this. Just, it's not denied, it's just delayed. And I hope that will be a little bit encouraging. But we were actually on our honeymoon when we really heard, we keep up with the news and we'd heard of COVID, but didn't think about it as that big of a deal, right? Like I think many of us. And so we were actually on a honeymoon in the Maldives when we had a little bit of a commotion go on there, long story, but where we actually really first found out about COVID and that, this pretty serious case. And so, but being able to have that much time together as newlyweds was, really such a great blessing to us. I had lived in New York City before we got married, and Tim had been pretty much all over the place with baseball and TV, ESPN, all that kind of stuff. So we really did long distance for the majority of our kind of dating and engagement periods. We rarely saw each other, a lot of FaceTime. So having that time together was such a blessing. And we actually adopted 3 dogs, which was awesome. They're the joy of our day, light of every day. They bring us so much joy and a little bit of effort, but it's okay. They're so worth it. So that's been fun. And Jason, one of the reasons that Tim and I got so much more involved in the fight against human trafficking has a lot to do with COVID and the effects that COVID has had on human trafficking. So, in a way, I'm so grateful for. There's a lot of heartbreak and a lot of sadness that goes hand in hand, with the pandemic. But I think there's been a lot of good that's come from it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Demi, because I think a lot of people, we can look at this as a time to sulk and be sad, certainly, but as an opportunity as well. And the opportunity came. And I want to ask a couple other questions about, you and certainly about Tim, but I want to ask you, I think, because this is a natural progression into why you got involved so heavily with human trafficking and the fight against human trafficking and how the pandemic played a role in that. So why don't you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So Really, to give you a full perspective, Jason, I was the reigning Miss South Africa back in June 2017, and I was, I pretty much survived a pretty violent carjack by 5 armed men. I surrendered, gave them everything, but the moment I tried running away, the guy on my side of the vehicle grabbed me, pushed me back into the vehicle, said, "Get in, you're going with us." And that's just the 30-second version of it. But that incident, and obviously after going through a lot of trauma counseling, etc., that incident really broke my heart for women, men and children worldwide. I think it opened my eyes to a really great evil that I did not necessarily realize existed in this day and age. Today it's estimated that 40.3 million people are trapped in human trafficking, which is just astonishing. And when I have the conversation with a lot of people, they're like, well, we just didn't know. We just had no idea. And, a couple of years ago, I was that same person. But Jason, it's one thing, when you don't know and you're not able to do anything about it. But it's another thing when you know and you choose not to do anything about it. And so that carjack incident really is what led me into doing more research, getting more knowledge. I never want to victimize myself. I don't know what my carjacker's intent was. Were they there just for my vehicle or for me? I don't want to speculate, but that is really what broke my heart and opened my eyes to this evil. And now fast forward 4 years, well, actually, after that incident, I started a campaign called Unbreakable because I had so many moms and young girls reaching out to me saying, Demi, if that happened to us, we would have no idea what to do. Can you, how did you know how to handle that situation? And I knew how to handle that situation in the best way possible because I had gone through some training that my dad, as a very loving, protective dad, had, sent me on women empowerment courses and safety driving courses and self-defense courses. And in that, blink of a moment, I was able to remember 2 things. And that first thing was, don't go to the second destination because it's probably not going to get better on the second destination than it is going to get on a big avenue, broad daylight, 5:30 in the afternoon, peak hour traffic, which was my scenario. And the second thing was the throat. And obviously this is not something to take up lightly or try at home because it can really hurt someone. That was a life-threatening situation for me. And I grabbed the steering wheel, punched the guy as hard as I could in his throat. And that is what, kind of created a small window of opportunity for me to get out of that vehicle and run away. And I sure did. But running away, and by the way, in 6-inch heels, because I was on my way to an event as Miss South Africa. So that'd probably be my little secret power if I ever had one. Running away this big avenue, Jason, you might think that was the most traumatizing thing, but it wasn't. It was running up that avenue, looking over my shoulder, not knowing if I'm going to be followed, shot, taken, and no one would stop to help me. That was probably the most traumatizing thing out of that whole incident, knocking on 30, 40 car windows, windows that were open. People could hear what I was saying, and no one would stop to help me. And it's sad because, I think our society gets so, and especially in South Africa with the high crime rate that we unfortunately have, people kind of get, probably taught, to be very careful because that might be set up. And I understand that. But, a young girl, she was 19 years at the age, ended up pulling over, letting me into her car, taking me to a safe space. And if it wasn't for that girl that, leaned over and opened and unlocked her door for me, I don't know what might have ended up happening. And that incident just led me to thinking, I don't want to be one of the 30, 40 cars that did nothing, that did absolutely nothing to help someone in need. I want to be that person as much as I can, to be a helping hand and to be a voice for someone that feel or might not be able to speak up for themselves. And so, fast forward a couple of years, I'm a board member of Her Song, which is one of the anti-human trafficking ministries of the Tim Tebow Foundation that is based here in the USA and specifically focused on survivor care, holistic survivor care here in the US. So that's pretty much the short version.
Well, I mean, we could spend 2 hours talking about that because I'm sure
For sure.
it affected you in so many ways. How did it affect your faith? We haven't really gone deep into your faith, and certainly this is a faith
Yeah.
and sports sort of podcast. What did that do for you going through that, and then seeing the work that you're doing now? How does your faith guide you through that, and how does Jesus and your relationship with him kind of nudge you and push you towards doing the work that you're doing right now?
Yeah. Jason, a really great question. Yes, I definitely was traumatized after that incident, but I decided, I had a choice to choose whether I'm going to live in fear for the rest of my life or whether I'm going to live in knowledge for the rest of my life. I don't think we should be fearful, but we should be knowledgeable to know that yes, there are bad people out there that don't necessarily have good intentions. And I'm going to do my best every day to be as proactive, to be able to be as preventative, as possible, to be aware, to when I believe the Holy Spirit tells me, get out of that elevator, don't get off at your floor, to get out of that elevator, not to, I think, Jason, unfortunately, so many times as women, we get told, oh, don't make a fuss about it. It's not, don't make a big deal about it. It's not that big of a deal. Oh, you'll hurt someone's feelings. And sometimes it's okay to make a fuss about it. Sometimes we need to make a fuss about something, especially when our lives are at risk. So, I just always want to encourage young women. I never want to instill fear in anyone, but I want to be able to have help educate people that you need to look out for yourself. You need to be aware of your surroundings. But then going back specifically to, how that's affected my faith, I think if anything, it's only made it stronger. I'm so grateful that I was able to escape that situation, but I know that's not the scenario for so many people around the world. And I decided to use that terrible mess and turn it into a message. And I personally believe that that's only by the grace of God that I am able to turn that mess into his message, not just my own message, but his message. And that, terrible trial has led me into helping other people achieve a triumph. And that I'm very honored about and very grateful for.
Demi-Leigh Tebow is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. We're presented today by IJM. You can check out ijm.org/slavery to learn more about the reality of slavery and human trafficking and how you can join the fight. World Day Against Trafficking in persons is July 30th. So this is to try and bring awareness to this awful thing that really is going on. I think you mentioned, Demi, 40 million enslaved. 40 million. Yeah. When you hear that number, that blows my mind when I hear that number. Does that do that for you? Because it does to me.
I mean, it does. It's not very comprehensible, to be very honest. I also know, it's an estimated $150 billion industry. I mean, Jason, that's some of, the biggest corporations worldwide combined. That's a bigger industry. And what's so sad is that, trafficking perpetrators are not that easily arrested or prosecuted. And I think that needs to change. And I love the work that IJM is doing to push bills, to push laws, to make that more possible. And Jason, I truly believe, 40.3 million people sounds unreachable. I mean, I get goosebumps just talking about it. It sounds like such a big number. How are we going to make a dent in that number? But Jason, I get motivated because even one life is worth it. One woman, one child, one man is worth it. And that is why we need to keep fighting, need to keep having these conversations, because even just saving one life is worth it.
Yeah, that's really good. I want to ask you, you mentioned you won the Miss South Africa, and you actually won Miss Universe in 2017, which is pretty cool in that pageant. And your husband obviously is very well known around the world, and being Miss Universe, you become very well known around the world. And I'm really fascinated because how have you guys helped each other kind of handle celebrity and fame and stay grounded in your faith when you have a lot of eyeballs on you and a lot of people pulling at you, asking for your time, both individually and together as a couple. How have you guys kind of encouraged each other and maybe learned from each other and how to handle this? Because it's great to have this platform where you can point a lot of people to Jesus, point a lot of people to human trafficking and slavery and the dangers and the problems going on there. But it's also another thing when so many people are seeing you and there's a celebrity part that you kind of have to manage. How have you guys helped each other out in that world?
Jason, like I said earlier, I knew nothing about American sports, and Tim certainly knew nothing about pageantry. So, in a big way, we never really had that much on surface level in common. But I mean, for us, I think the one thing that really is the foundation to our relationship is one, our faith and our love for Jesus, and two, the love that we have for people. And I think that's one of, God's greatest commandments is to love God and to love people. And that is probably the foundation of our marriage and what we base it on. And, I think it's very encouraging to just see how we, both feel and get just very fulfilled by the work that we get to do and the work that we get to do together. And Jason, it's wonderful having a title. It's wonderful having a platform. It's wonderful wearing a pretty ball gown and a tiara and a sash and, people asking for your picture. But really, what does that mean when you can't use it for something bigger than yourself? And I think that is really kind of a viewpoint that I don't want to ever speak for Tim, but that I believe we both have. Is we're so grateful for the platforms that we have, but what's even more important is what we use that for. Is that to portray the love of Jesus and to fight for image bearers of God around the world that can't fight for themselves? Or is that something that we're only using to benefit ourselves? And I've been in a situation where I've been very focused on the things that I want to do and that I want to be a part of. And, that fashion and beauty and modeling is fun and it's a great industry, but there's very little fulfillment in that for me. That's kind of what I do, but it's not who I am. And, I think that's just very motivating to both Tim and I, knowing what we have in common is what we have in purpose.
So I have a couple more questions, two more questions here with Demi-Leigh Tebow. The first is about human trafficking and slavery. So if somebody comes up to you and they happen to meet you and say, Demi, I want to help, but I don't have a huge platform, right? Or I don't have a lot of money or resources, but I want to get involved.
Yeah.
What would you say to them? How would you encourage them?
Yeah, actually, Jason, right now, while we're recording this, it's my birthday coming up soon. But I know that this will probably be aired by the time, my birthday is over. But I've decided to use social media, use my birthday to be able to raise funds for her song, which is the anti-human trafficking ministry of Tim Tebow Foundation here in the US. And so, that's one way. And it's as much as giving $26 that will be able to fund one trafficking survivor with food for a whole week, or there's various other numbers, but we allow people, you can give as much as $1, whatever you can to help, because there's a staggering number that there's only an estimated 1,800 beds for survivor care available in the US, 1,800. And now, Jason, if we're talking about 40.3 million people around the world, which we can guess hundreds of thousands of those victims are US citizens, what if even just 1% of victims become survivors? Where would we be able to take them? There's no safe place for them to go. There's not enough resources. So we need to work hard and we need to work fast to be able to house them, to give them the opportunity for long-term restoration, healing, and very much needed hope. And then another way, the Tim Tebow Foundation and being a board member of her song, we created a platform called the Rescue Team. And there we share various resources just to help educate people on this topic. And you can go to timtebowfoundation.org. I know IJM has phenomenal resources as well. I get their newsletters every week, and I love reading about the work that they do. But it's as much as just having a conversation with your neighbor. It's as much as a parent just educating their children on making wise decisions. And I think parents so often want to be cool and want to kind of be their children's friends, and they don't want to, say no to certain activities or whatever that might be. But I think being able to love your child fully is to be able to have an honest conversation with them. And I'm a dog mom, so I can't really speak out of experience, but I know that my parents had very hard conversations with me. My dad forced me to go on safety driving courses before I was allowed to drive my own car, because he loves me so much and cares so much for me. And I think as a parent, that's probably one of the greatest things that you can do for your child. So, I just want to encourage people listening, don't be discouraged to feel that you can't make a difference because you don't have a big dollar amount to give, or you don't have the capability to start a foundation or do something extravagant, because I don't think that we need to do something extravagant to be able to have a meaningful, life-changing impact on someone's life.
That's really well said. She is Demi-Leigh Tebow. I do have to ask you one question. I want to get your reaction because we are part of a ministry called Pro Athletes Outreach, PAO, and a lot of the NFL players that are a part of our ministry and their wives, we kind of help minister to them a little bit through Sports Spectrum. You are now, at least at this moment, who knows how long it'll be, you're an NFL player's wife. And I don't know if you were expecting that when you got married a year and a half ago. Does that sound weird to you that, you're a football player's, maybe before it wasn't because he wasn't playing football at the time, he was playing baseball, Tim, but now he's back in the football world. How is that for you being a wife of a football player now?
Jason, like I said, the biggest thing that Tim and I have in common is not sports, is not the outside world, but it's really our mission and our purpose, and that is to love God and to love people. And, I'm so excited for him. He's working so hard, but we'll have to see, what happens. I don't count my eggs before they hatch. So, just loving him, supporting him, and whatever that might mean.
That's really well said. She is Demi-Leigh Tebow, the wife to Tim Tebow, 2017 Miss Universe, and doing great work with the Tim Tebow Foundation and the Her Song Foundation. And then, of course, our friends at IJM doing great work. To learn more about the reality of slavery and human trafficking, how you can join the fight, you can check out ijm.org/slavery. You can go to the Tim Tebow Foundation website as well. And World Day Against Trafficking in Persons is July 30th. Demi, thanks so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. It was a pleasure to talk to you. All the best, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.